Good evening, welcome. So we have a small crowd, and you may say, why would she use the microphone when really, chances are I could project, not a problem. But we are recording this evening in the event that there are some people who would like to be here, and we will hold on to the recording and share, make it accessible for people who may be interested later on. I'm Elizabeth Wood, Assistant Superintendent. Welcome, thank you for coming this evening. I do want to recognize folks we have in the audience here in support. We actually have 3 Board of Education members. We have our Board of Education President, Bill Casey, right over here. We have former President, Mrs. Mary Blaber. We have Board of Education member Todd Gilbert here with us as well, who are often out and about in the community supporting the work that we're doing, and also taking an opportunity to listen to parents and their concerns or any questions you may have later on. I also want to acknowledge administrators in our midst. We have Rose Vera, who is the academic administrator for kindergarten through 5th grade math and science. And we have Kathleen Stranges, who is the academic administrator at the elementary level for English language arts and social studies. We also in the audience have our, she's actually an AIS teacher in the district, and our Shenandoah Teachers Association president, Ms. Megan Della Rosa. She is joining us this evening. And here we have our elementary principals, the folks who are able to join us this evening. Erica Ryan is principal of Shattuckon Elementary. Jill Gould, principal of Scano Elementary. Greg Pace, Tasago Elementary. Andrew Hills, Oranjan. Karen Skarka, Chango. Lisa Mickle, Octay. And Michael Smith, Arenda Elementary. So we're pleased to have some of you coming out to learn more about assessment and the assessment program in Shenandoah. And we will talk a little bit about the assessments that we do in general, and also a little bit about the state test this evening. We do have index cards. If you think of something, and it's a burning question that you would like to ask, feel free to hop up. In fact, maybe we want to even pass them out. Thank you. And so we'll pass out an index card too. If you need pencils, we have those as well. Feel free to write down any questions you may have that come to you. If you're somebody who has quite a few questions, don't hesitate to take multiple cards. That's no problem at all. We'll collect those toward the end, sort through them, and then work to address the questions that we're able to address publicly. And then if you have specific questions, many of us would be willing to stay later and talk to you about any specific questions you may have. I'll start by saying that the purpose of tonight's presentation is really to provide an understanding of the role of assessment. And part of that is really understanding what is it that we learn from assessment in our system? Why do we give assessments in general? And then explain how assessment results are used in Shenandoah. It's this really interesting phenomenon that assessment is being talked about so much in the media. I mean, we've been assessing in schools, well, I don't know, were any of you assessed when you were in school? Yeah, it's been going on as long as I know. I really don't know how it could not be part of the education program. So here it is, now we're talking about it, it's getting a lot, and you know what, it's getting a lot of attention, and it's good for us. It's good for us to go back and pull up the mirror and think about what is it exactly are we doing? And how do we make sure that the assessments that we are using in our system are really the right ones and giving us good information about our students as learners? I can tell you what this presentation is not. We are not going to be addressing the Common Core in any sort of great specificity, although I can tell you the State Education Department released a survey this fall. Many of you may be aware of that. It was very lengthy. If you took time to take the survey, they have, in fact, I was just hearing from, I should know his title, maybe an assistant commissioner from the State Education Department. They have poured through all of the feedback, they've coded the feedback, and they are in the process of convening small work groups to come together and make some, what we anticipate will be some minor adjustments to Common Core over the next couple of years with a timeline for implementation over the next 3 years. So the State Education Department has definitely solicited feedback about Common Core, and we expect some probably modest adjustments. Honestly, not atypical for what happens anytime standards are released. When standards are released, people realize, oh, we wish that there were things that we could do differently about it, and we expect that this will join in that typical cycle. And we're not going to spend a tremendous amount. We will talk about the New York State Assessment Program, but that isn't the sole focus of what we're doing tonight. We're also not going to address political positions. And I have to say, I'm sure you've heard a lot about just assessments in general. We all have. And being somebody in the field, as many of us are, some of it pains us because of the inaccuracies in it. So, we appreciate the conversation and we appreciate the interest. We just say, just be careful to consider your source and keep digging for the source of whatever is being presented. I can tell you why learning is important, or assessment is important, and it really starts with measuring what we're doing. Is what we're doing with students working? It would be like taking your child to some sort of, say they take piano lessons, and every time you go to the piano lesson, the only thing that happens is the instructor plays. Not great, right? How do we know if the children are learning anything, if the student is learning anything? Students have to take time to perform that which it is they are being taught, and that is how we learn what they need next. And in some places it happens naturally. It's just naturally part of the cycle of instruction, and you'll see it really should be in all instructional programs. We also learn about our instructional program here in Shenendehowa as a result of assessments. And I will show you some very real examples about what we learn because of assessments we administer. So we learn about your child, and we learn about how we're doing on the whole. And both of those are very important to us. I don't know if you can read this, but it says, I taught Stripe how to whistle. And the other person says, I don't hear him whistling. I said I taught him, I didn't say he learned it. I often think about how, maybe you remember things better than I do, but how smart we would all be if we remembered everything we were taught, right? So we have to stop and measure and say, just because we teach it doesn't mean it has been learned. And the only way to know if what we have taught has been learned is to measure it. And that's a very important part of what we do. We measure students in a variety of ways in Shenendehowa, as all school districts do. We have summative assessments, and they're these, you can make them, they can feel heavy, or sometimes it's what the kids get butterflies about. Some kids walk in cool as a cucumber. I was always very, very envious of those kids who can show up for these big tests and be like, no problem. You think about them. SATs, Regents exams, these are the big assessments that are just given as part of a normal assessment process. The New York State assessments, it's a big assessment that measures a lot of learning that happens over the course of the year. Also, did any of you take Iowa tests? Yes, Terra Novas, yes, I remember in the summer I'd rush to kind of open up the envelope and see how I did compared to national norms. It was a point of information, right? Much like many of the assessments we give now that are the bigger assessments, it's a point of information. We also give informal assessments, and informal assessments are very important. These are the small ones. Honestly, I think one of the best informal assessments is the teacher walking around the classroom, watching children work, and giving feedback right there based on what is happening and what they see. That is some of the most powerful assessment that happens in our classrooms. There's classwork that teachers are collecting and assessing. There's one-to-one dialogue going on, review of writing samples, all different versions of assessments in classrooms. This is a graphic of the cycle of assessment. And it's really, if you think about it, if you have ever taught somebody to do anything, you name it, it falls in this cycle. It's you're planning what you want to teach, you are then delivering the content, you are then watching how are they doing with it, then you're going in and readjusting or adjusting what you're doing based on how well you see them doing. You're doing some sort of, you somehow get them to engage in the activity again so you can measure it again, and then you're going back and starting the cycle all over again. And that is what all good teachers do. It's part of it, that they have to elicit feedback, and then they have to make determinations about what is needed next. And sometimes they're making determinations for what the class needs, sometimes it's a determination based on what individual students need. So when should students be assessed? The real answer is continuously. And it shouldn't be this singular event. We need to measure it often. And I say, I was going to say the younger they are, the more we need to measure, but it probably depends on the content area, truthfully. All of us should be measured continually. And I say it often, judge me by the total contribution I make to the system. Because anybody who works closely with me knows I occasionally make mistakes or I occasionally say something I shouldn't. But I always hope that my total contributions are in a positive, overall reflective. And I feel like that is the best way to measure anyone's performance. What's the total contribution? So in order to have that big picture, you have to have many points along the way. And it's okay if some of those points are not exactly hitting the mark. That's reality. So we talk about the fact that it's important to, and it's the second bullet here, we need to triangulate data. We have to see patterns emerging. So it's okay to have hiccups and not be on your A game all of the time, as long as the totality of your work shows that you're making progress, right? Does that make sense to you? Like, we all have little missteps along the way, and so it's really important that we judge students and their learning by the totality of their work, much like I hope your families judge you in terms of your inputs at home, right? There might be the night that you say, I'm done, I'm not picking up anymore, right? We all have to be judged by the total inputs. And so when we do that for children is when we make the best decisions about them as learners, because we all have little variations. And kids grow in an erratic pattern in terms of their learning. It happens that way. It's a very rare that's just this constant, steady incline. So the more information we can collect, the more we learn about the child and how the child is progressing. For this reason, we give many different assessments in Shenendehowa for many different purposes and get a lot of information about your child. How many of you have heard of Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment? Sometimes, we're calling it F&P. The F&P. So we have children read aloud. We follow a very careful script that has been developed by these reading researchers, and it gives us information about how a child is progressing on their reading. I think most of us would say it's some of the most important information we collect on children. And one of the benefits, and I know it takes a lot of time for teachers to administer this assessment, but one of the benefits is it's one-to-one, teacher to student. So they collect a lot of information from the children. Writing samples. You can learn a lot about how a child is growing based on looking at their writing. And we do writing samples quarterly at our elementary grades. In fact, Kathleen Strangis, our academic administrator for ELA, has been bringing teachers across the district together to look at all, say, the grade 3 writing samples together and looking at the rubric. And then teachers learn, oh, this is how we should be scoring this rubric. Oh, this is where a student should be. This is how you taught it. It's a wonderful opportunity for professional development for our teachers as well, and to make sure that our children are getting comparable experiences, be it at Tasago, or at Scano, or at Oranjan, or at Chango, that we have a Shen standard of education here, and we're very proud of that. We also have quarterly math assessments. Rose Barra has worked with teams of teachers to pull together these quarterly assessments that are administered across the district. And in a little bit, you'll see some of the great information we can get about individual students and their learning, and about our school district, and how are we providing the right resources, are we providing the right professional development supports for teachers so that we can learn more about ourselves and deliver the best product possible. We certainly have end-of-year assessments and the New York State assessments that are also part of the total package. And it's this kind of depth of information that allows us to make really informed decisions and program recommendations for students. Assessments, we're kind of competitive here at Shen. You probably know that. We're competitive athletically. We pride ourselves on a quality academic program. We compare our results to other districts. We want to know that when you as parents choose Shenendehowa, you are getting a lot of value for your investment in a home here and your trust in us as a system. We take that very seriously. We compare our results to other districts, and we want to know how we're doing constantly. We also look at school to school. It's all good right now, but there are times, I've literally sat in meetings where I'm hearing one principal say to another, how did that happen? How are you getting that score? Our teachers are working really hard, and yet our scores are a little bit different. How does that happen? And we lead into wonderful, rich conversations about the product that we're offering and how we're teaching children. So that just another perspective for you in terms of what the value is for assessments, in terms of us measuring the program and learning about individual students. We can take it right down to the grade level. How is a grade level teaching a certain topic? How is an individual student progressing? I will say, I've got it up here, and it's an important point. While we say New York State assessments are important, we do not use it as a sole determination of any sort of promotion or retention. And while it is a summative assessment and a very important summative assessment, we make sure we look at that information in terms of the larger whole. We do occasionally have students who come in and they are a little anxious. And maybe they get a high 2 on the assessment when their typical progression is a little bit higher. We also get the flip. We get some students who do really well on insert the name of any assessment, and yet their typical progress is slightly different. And so it's important in all cases that we look at many, many pieces of information together. I will say the New York State assessments do help us measure how our students are doing relative to more rigorous standards. And here's where I speak from. I've been an assistant superintendent for a little over 4 years. Prior to that, I was an elementary principal for 10, 5 years here and 5 years in another district. I have seen the experience for elementary students become so much richer over the time I have been at this level. And no offense, I think we thought we were doing great work years and years ago. Teachers worked hard, we got good outcomes. I see the experience is richer now. And I see what you consider the typical student more engaged and learning at higher levels than ever before. Personally, I think it was due. I think too many kids were bored with their experience, and that was on us. And it was good for us to stretch our academic program. And the 3A New York State assessment is a rigorous measure. And it does help us to measure how are our students doing relative to a much higher standard that has been established. But I do want to remind you, because children grow in fits and spurts, like we all do as we're learning something new, just because they may not hit a certain target at a certain point does not mean they won't at some point. It means they didn't on that assessment on that date. It does help us track how are they doing as they move through elementary school and as they head into middle school, and then as they get to much more rigorous curriculum as they get to the high school level, where the options open up. Do any of you have students in the high school right now? If you are interested, if you want to look to the future about what's ahead, go on the website at some point under the academic page. On the academic page, we have something called progressions documents. These progressions documents trace the course offerings for students in grade 6 through grade 12 for every core academic area. Proud to say, I don't think it's probably, I'm sure we have the most diverse and advanced offerings available in the region. There are an incredible number of choices of honors courses. We offer support courses, we offer Regents level courses, a lot of honors level courses, advanced placement courses, specialty programs, technology and facts and business, a wide array. Look ahead to see what that is. If you have this feeling of, wow, it seems like kids are really being stretched right now, what we do is open doors for later. And that is really exciting. And it gives you that kind of ray of hope in terms of what's ahead and what will be available to your child as they move through. And the hard work now does pay off in terms of long-term opportunities and results for students. One of the
criticisms that we've heard about the New York State assessments is that parents don't get a lot of information back. You know, there's some merit. We in the field have said, gosh, we would wish that they would release a few more questions. Well, the state has responded. Last year they released 50% of the questions that were part of the New York State assessment. This year we hear it's going to be more, 60%, maybe 70%, we'll see. And we also know that the parent reports give valuable information, but we also hear from some people that the language in it is a little dense or hard to work through. I've been told that the state is revising the parent report, but I don't have access to it yet, so here is just a sample of what that parent report looks like as of now, and this is just one small part of it. Minimally, and I'm sure you're going to get more because they're working on revising it now, you're going to find out how many points were earned by your child in each of the core areas that are tested. So in this one, it's the ELA, so you're going to get it for reading and for writing. You're going to get the total possible points. And then you're going to see the average points earned across New York State. So you're going to get some very good, I consider it to be very good, I appreciate looking at it for my own children when these reports come home, comparative information, particularly when you're in a high-performing school district. Sometimes you can feel like, oh, you know, they're just the middle of the road. And then you look at how well, typically, our students are doing relative to the rest of the state, and it's like, wow, okay, all right, we're making progress here. And so there is some I find, again, as a parent, some very interesting information that comes home, and I can only imagine that it will get better as the state hears the feedback that parents would like a little bit more information. When I talk about the information we can learn from assessments, here's an example. Grade 4, one of the questions was on ELA, vocabulary acquisition and use. And in this particular example, they had to figure out the meaning of a vocabulary word using context clues. So this question is given to all students in grade 4. And what we get back as a school system, we get right back to individual. We know if a student got it right or wrong and what the wrong answer might be in some cases. We know that in this classroom, 85% of the teachers, or 85% of the students in that teacher's classroom got that item correct. We know that in the school, 81% of students got that item correct. And we know that in the larger region, 67%. So if you're that classroom teacher, how are you feeling right now? Pretty good, right? Yeah. Okay, our hard work paid off. Wow. That's good. That's really good. Sorry, it's a lot of numbers, but we get very used to looking at numbers because we learn a lot about our teaching and our system by looking at numbers to this level of complexity. First question. Grade 5, the content area is math, and while they didn't release the question for this specific one, I really don't need to know what the specific question is because I know that if it's a measurement data and it's a volume question, that tells me enough to know if my students understood how to measure and arrive at volume. If you look at this, you'll see the district average score is on the very far left column, and you'll see we have, hypothetically speaking, 8 elementary schools. Count them across the top, just hypothetically. So look at school number 3. How are they feeling about the teaching of volume? So if you didn't see the second question down below, you might say, boy, I'm pulling out my best stuff about volume. I don't know how they did on the other questions. We worked really hard, but boy, they're good. They're nice students. They will be fine. But maybe 5th grade math isn't really their strongest suit. And then you look at the next question. And the very students in the very school outperformed the district and many of the other schools. What can we no longer say? That it's the students or the school. We work a lot with teachers to say, it's okay. It's okay if your class got the 84.6% As long as you're looking at this and you want to say, how do I get better? I'll tell you, any teachers in the audience? Right, you know the feeling, right? The first time you look at it, you're like, oh, I could have done that better. You walk out of the lesson, oh, didn't go exactly as I planned. We're on a continual journey of improvement if you're in the classroom. It is just the way it goes. It's okay. You cannot hit a home run every single day, every single lesson. But you can learn from this, and you can say, wow, what do you use to teach volume? I want that. And you know what the other teachers are saying? They're saying to this group in School 3, for operations, find a whole number quotient with up to 4-digit dividends and 2-digit divisors. Wow, what did you, I'll give you my information on volume if you'll give me the other information. And it starts really good conversation. So we get really concerned, and we talk a lot about assessment in terms of individual students. It is very important, and as a parent, I like getting that information, and as a teacher, we recognize the importance of sharing that information with parents and measuring individual students. But I wanted to share with you that larger context that we in schools really look forward to, because we look forward to improving ourselves continually. I did want to, and shortly I'm really pleased to turn it over to Mr. Pace, who's going to give us some examples from a principal's lens. But before I do that, 2 more things I want to share with you. One, there's a lot of information for parents on Engage New York. Engage New York is www.engage.org. Oh, excuse me, engagenewyork.org. Even, honestly, if you just go into Chrome and you type Engage, I guarantee it pops right up. It's a very common site. There's a ton of information there for parents put out by the State Education Department. I put a couple of links in here. They have Understanding the School Report for parents up there, but I will say, check back this summer because they are in the process of updating it, and they will post an updated school report for parents to interpret. There are annotated test questions up there. There are the release test questions from previous years, questions that you may have yourself about the New York State assessment. Really go, help yourself, look through it. I find information is very powerful. The other point I want to make before I turn it over here. I found this and I thought that this was really powerful. Rick Stiggins talks about what we do with assessment. Sorry, I just don't want to have my back to it again. If we can help students know and understand what they do well and remain aware of their next area of focus, oh, that's powerful. And if we can help students to recognize their own strengths and achievements so they can see how they are working to narrow gaps between what is and what is desired to know. And if we can promote optimism, confidence, and hope in all of our students, it's a home run. Because what we have to do is help our students to see themselves as learners. And I will give a plug for a book called Mindset. Any of you read it? Strongly encourage you to. It's actually not the juiciest book. You might want to just Google Carol Dweck. I'm sure you can find YouTube clips where she talks about her theories. The theory is so important to every teacher and to every parent. It is really important that we instill in children a growth mindset, that they don't fear being measured, that they seek it out actively, and get very excited about their own possibilities to grow based on that measurement. There have been a lot of research studies. She's from Stanford University. A lot of research studies that show those students with that type of orientation who see themselves as a continual learner, not afraid to make mistakes, not afraid to be measured, even if that measurement comes up that they have areas to improve upon, go the farthest in life by far. And you realize in order to really have high levels of achievement, you have to be willing to take risks. And that really is something that we can foster in our own children. Reasonable risks, right? Calculated, carefully selected ones that don't cause bodily injury. But in terms of learning, it's a wonderful thing to promote. Now, Mr. Pace is going to take it over and he's going to talk about how he looks at assessment from a principal's lens.
This is, from a principal perspective, the first thing I want to do is look at the building. And then I'm looking at classrooms. And then what ultimately happens is what I'm going to go over with you now, which is what teachers are doing the most of with their own classes, and that's talking about specific student progression. So I wanted to talk a little bit how I use the assessments with a student review. So I have a student sample up there. A student is a hard worker and is getting AIS services, academic intervention services, specifically in reading. The classroom teacher is hoping for a score of a 3. The students are scored 1, 2, 3, 4, and is optimistic as that's a big goal, but she's hoping that she can get it. The student will probably get a 2, but she's really hoping for that 3. But she's establishing the groundwork for success in 4th grade ultimately. So then the student takes the test, the teacher looks at that score and says, what the heck? And I can picture the scene like it was yesterday. It's August, she's standing in my doorway, and she's very upset. Cannot believe the student scored a 1. And she knows this student backwards and forwards, so she is very concerned. And she's also self-reflecting. Maybe she was off. That's a program evaluation. So then what we do is we look at the building results. So we're going to look at how the child did within the building. So when we look at that, the child scored an F&P score of an O. A P is grade level. So they're almost there. And then we look at her ELA writing, reading grades, and the student score is somewhere between a 66 and a 73. And then we have a Lexile score of a 685, which is, again, another assessment that we did. And they're almost there. Everything is like, they're right at the cutting edge, which is most likely going to be a 2 on a New York State assessment, which scored a 1. And that's really frustrating for us. We're trying to figure out what's best for this student. So what we do is we have to figure out what are we going to do next. So what we do is with a score of 1, the building needs to provide extra assistance to this child, and the teacher is really hoping that we don't have to provide those AIS services. Teacher feels that, I think if she's in the classroom, this child is going to bloom, and if we have to give these extra services outside, doesn't necessarily think the child is going to need it, but this one is really testing her, saying, maybe I missed something. The teacher is thinking, maybe I missed something. So now we go down, and the 4th grade teacher gets a hold of this information and says, hold it. What are you guys doing? This student scored a 1, definitely needs AIS services. It's like, that is a gold standard we have to look at. I understand that you've worked with them for a while, but I think we really need to have some services in place. However, the 3rd grade teacher is still educating. So now we're going to dig a little bit deeper. So now what we're going to do, we're going to look at the test. We're actually going to recall the New York State test and say, okay, hold on. I want to actually look at what actually happened with this child on the test. So when we did that, we find out she didn't complete the last 2 passages, which is about 8 to 10 questions. So she wasn't able to complete it. So then what we do is we want to look at how she did on the rest of the test, and she had a minimal number of questions wrong. Okay, it wasn't that she had a lot wrong. We thought, she's on the right path. She was taking her time. So teacher is saying, well, if she had more time, she would have probably done a little bit better. The teacher knew when she collected the test that she was still working, but she had to call time. The test was timed, and she collected the test. She didn't realize that the girl was missing that much on the test. So the outcome, what did we actually decide to do with this student? This is important. The student received services by the teacher. Some supplemental is needed. We looked at the test and we said, you know what? If she had more time, we just have to work on her speed a little bit. Could be fluency. We're going to work on that speed and see if we can get her up to par. But she does have the good comprehension skills, and she just needs to work on that time a little bit. She scored in the 60s to 70s in 4th grade. We concentrated on fluency, and we ended up actually in January having to pull the child for AIS services. So we actually did have to end up giving her some extra services. And then at the end of 4th grade, she almost, very close, highest 3 or highest 2 you can get. So she's almost at that 3 range. So when we're looking at the New York State assessment, actually it was a good predictor. We could have given those AIS services from the beginning. If we did a blanket view of it and we said she's a 1, we have to give those services, we could have probably been in a safe area. However, the teachers did feel like after looking at that, I think I can support this student. And the student probably did benefit from listening to her peers and getting that assistance from the teacher right in the classroom. We eventually did go a little bit heavier with AIS support. So that's just one view, okay? Second example, we can go on. Student sample 2. I wanted to give you a little more information about this student so you can get to know her or him. Student has a strong schema and interest in anything historical. Student struggles with new concepts but is distracted. Loves to draw. Good oral communication skills, has many friends, is very sociable. Teacher feels student can retain information long enough to test in reading, but then is unable to apply concepts afterwards. Although testing is occasionally average, teacher feels strongly that the student is not carrying over knowledge to other areas. Some testing results are very low. Math is satisfactory. Her reading grades are reflecting her ability to learn in the short term and gain an average report card grade in the 60s with fluctuations in scores. She scored sometimes in the 80s, and then sometimes she would score quite low. Teacher has some concerns but cannot specify child's deficit. Is it just distraction? That was probably the biggest word that came out when we talked about this child. So, move on, and we decide we're going to look at test scores. Let's see how this child is doing. So now we're in the fall, and the former 3rd grade teacher feels that attention could be a factor with the child. The grade 4 teacher feels there's more than attention at play. The grade 4 teacher recommends student to the instructional support team, and we do a review. We look at the scores above. We have a report card grade in the 63 and 60 average range in quarters 3 and 4, and the child is in 3rd grade. Their FMP is a O, which is only 1 off. They're very close to being right on par with the FMP. The reading achievement scores, the local assessment that we give, scores an 85. Her writing is a 3, a solid 3. Her math is an 85 and 88. Her math achievement test is an 80. So we have these conflicting scores going back and forth. We have some test results that are positive. So then we're saying, okay, Greg, pull up the test. Let's see how she did. You have the testing results. Child did not take the New York State assessment. So we needed that extra. In this case, we didn't have the information for a student to actually look at what is it that they are actually missing. What are some of the things as far as our program that we could be doing wrong or that we're doing right? Let's actually get some validation from the New York State assessment, but we didn't have that information to make a decision. Just today, I'm going to give one more example. Today we were meeting on a student. Student is doing very well. Student is getting a lot of support. And suddenly we had this huge jump. And that happens with students. Suddenly they will start making connections and they mature a little bit. That's what happens in elementary school. And they're suddenly doing really well. Different report than I've had on this student in the past year. So suddenly this child is doing really well. Every single person's reaction around the table was the same. And they said, we got to see how she does when she has to do that test. Let's see what happens when she takes the New York State assessment. And she's getting pulled. Parents have opted to not have her take that assessment. And that's a killer. Everyone. That was a tough one to take today because we're really not sure when a kid makes such a massive jump. We don't know what that actually means. Is it a fluke with the content that we're currently presenting? Teacher was saying, the content is a little bit different, it's a little bit softer, and math right now, it's going to get a little more complicated, we're getting into fractions. So when we see these shifts, sometimes it's really helpful to have that New York State assessment. It's not the only thing that we look at, but it does assist us sometimes in actually having a tipping point. When it's not there, it does cause some problems because the test is longer and it does give us more information, more data, more questions, more things to look at. So I thank you.
Great, thank you. So just a little bit more before we open it up to some of the questions on the note cards. Actually, if you have written one down, If you don't mind just going around collecting, we'll take a look at them and then see if we're going to recommend if you come talk to one of us or if we're going to address them or not. Just to, kind of bring back around what Mr. Pace was talking about. We collect a lot of information on children, and it's too bad that, I feel like we're talking a lot about numbers, and we do see children as children too. I want to make that really clear. Like, we love their smiling faces. We love hearing them talk about home. We love tracing them. I'll tell you, one of the best things you want to make my day, I walked through Coda Middle School because, and Erica, did you go to Coda ever? I used to be the principal at Chattacon. Erica's there now. You walk through Coda and they're like, it was my elementary principal. Like, they're just precious beings. And, we're talking a lot about numbers, but we really do care about your children too. Just the focus of this presentation this evening is on assessment. But I just don't want to neglect the fact that we do see them as individuals who have great ideas and contribute to the larger whole of our school communities. Another really important point I want to make. You hear us talking about supports and really monitoring careful measurements. We do that because that's our work. It is important for us to monitor students and their learning. We also remain eternally optimistic about all children, and we know that when we give them support, their potential is limitless. Those of us who've been around for a while, and those teachers in the audience, those of you who've raised older children or even watched it with own family members, we all have many, many stories of children who have changes in life, may need additional supports through elementary school, may even not be all that turned on through middle school, even sometimes even through high school, but absolutely catch fire as 20 and 30-somethings. We have to be awfully careful about the labels we apply to children. And if you go back to what I was saying before about a growth mindset, we can't have children assume the labels. Just like we can't have them assume a label of, and no offense if this is important to you and your child, but you're perfect, don't change, you're brilliant, all good. I like to shower my children with praise too. But it also comes with, and keep working hard. Because if you stop learning right now, I don't mean to be offensive, but in another 20 years, you're not going to be overly competitive in the marketplace. So it's a continuous process, and it's an ebb and flow for all of us. And so when you hear us talking about applying additional supports, all it is it's recognizing the potential within and providing options later on. We all grow and change at our own rates, and we want to make sure it's our job that we have given as many options to students so that they can choose their own path and with their parents and have a lot of opportunity after Shenendehowa. In terms of what we do here in school, we really try to promote that optimism. We try, and you've seen, we try to examine what we teach and how we teach it. We try to be eternally optimistic about every child, very important. And we try to remember that the learning experience should be positive. I can't say as though I've never learned something under duress. I know I have. But I know I've liked it a whole lot more when it's been a positive experience. And I assume that the same holds true for most of you. And in terms of what you can do at home, the very best thing parents can do, I hate to tell you, it's not fret about schoolwork, and it's not fret about every single number that comes home. If you can work on developing the young mind, and it comes through vocabulary, exposing children to advanced concepts. I get concerned when I'm in the checkout line and I hear people, I talk baby talk too at 18 months, right, to an 18-month-old. But as they mature, you really have to have in-depth conversations. You need to expose them to bigger concepts, vocabulary. You need to take children places, take them to, I hear it all the time, museums. It doesn't have to, I think museums are a great place to take your kids, but it doesn't have to be. Just talking to them in the car ride. It is amazing what children retain. If you do that, and then you turn them over to us for the academic part, we're in great shape. It's a wonderful foundation for learning in the future. Positive expectations, support where needed, and going back to that growth mindset, praising effort. Very important. Effort, 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 because that's what leads to achievement in life, is effort. So at this point, we'll see, do we have any specific questions? Yeah, here's one. Why are the New York State assessments given in the third quarter when teachers haven't covered the curriculum, especially in math? Forces teachers to start jumping around, not covering the content in depth. And yeah, we need a questionable learning and growth. We hear you. Really, we've worked hard, and I'll say, Rose in particular, working with the teachers, we know where that assessment is given and where it is in that curriculum progression. We work hard to have children have exposure to all of the content in advance. But just like, honestly, just like the experience will be eventually on a Regents exam, sometimes the teacher is counting on the assessment will have more emphasis in this area, a little less emphasis in this area. That does occasionally happen. Would we like to see the assessments a little bit later? Depending on who you ask, yeah, some of us probably would like to see it a little later in the year. But there are other issues that are compounding when the state has them placed in the year. So in terms of why are they in the third quarter, and we work hard to try to get as much of that material in, because it doesn't feel great for a third or fourth or fifth grader to see stuff that they haven't seen before on that assessment. Rose, would you say in math in particular, most of our students have had exposure before they see those assessment questions?
And there are some topics that are specifically designated by New York State as post-test topics, and the teachers are aware of what they need to cover before test and post-test.
All right, here's a good question. Why are assessments optional? We don't really consider them to be. That's the honest answer. We don't really consider assessments to be optional. We spend a lot of time talking about the value of them. And I'll tell you, if I were to suggest to any of these individuals that we give something that they don't see value in, I'm going to be hearing about it. And we talk extensively. And you know why I'm going to hear about it from them? Because they're going to hear about it from every single teacher in their school. We talk a lot about the assessments we give, why we give them, and we continue discussing the merit of each and every one. Do I think our assessment program is exactly right now where it'll be in 2 years or 5 years? No, because we are always thinking about it and evolving. But I think we're pretty satisfied with where we are, knowing that we will continue to get better. We don't consider them to be optional. We just don't, and that's the answer. How long does it typically take to get results to parents? All right, we could do better on this, and I'm going to be optimistic that at some point in the future, and from our perspective as a school, we'd like the results sooner too. It takes a long time for us to score the assessments, and it takes a few months to get the results back. Parents get the results in early fall, sometimes even it's early October that the results are mailed to you. They don't come from Shen, they come from, it's called the NARIC, it's a regional information center, to more information than you really care to know. But they're mailed directly there to our parents, and it's usually early fall. Would we like it sooner? Oh yeah, we would. And I think that is one thing that we're right to ask for, that we start working on the development of assessments that provide us information with a faster turnaround time. The state is telling us that when we go to computer-based testing, there will be a better turnaround time. We'll see, right?
We're quicker to correct it. The academic administrators will have everything corrected and sent out within a week or two after the assessment is given. It's the processing at the other end. So Shen gets their stuff done complete. We're done within 3 weeks. Everything is sent out, both ELA and math. We're separated out by a week. Everything is out of the district. So
that's right. Yeah, we're down on our end quickly. We'd like to put pressure on the state to turn it around and get it back to us and to parents faster, for sure. And then somebody noted, I'm still waiting on results from an assessment 2 months ago, and it must be the COGADs, and you're right. Those are assessments we do not grade in-house, we have to send them out. We have the assessments back. In fact, I was just corresponding with Ms. Vera today about the letter that will be sent out to parents with their results. I'm gonna say 10 days at most. It takes quite a while to compile put the correct letter with the correct assessment result and get them mailed out. but I think 10 days is reasonable for you to expect those results back. So, I know you probably have children at home, right, awaiting you to come home and look at homework. If you have other specific questions for us, we're happy to stay here for a few minutes. We welcome the opportunity to talk directly with parents. Come on up, ask your questions, and we're happy to respond and hear from you as well. I do want to say thank you very much for coming out, and I hope you found that you learned something about the topic of assessment and the importance of assessment here in Shenendehowa. And I hope more than anything you walk out knowing that the work we do with your children every day is very important to us. And we value the opportunity to teach your children, and we pride ourselves on providing a very good product and a good learning experience for your children. So thank you very much for coming out this evening.